Hello, sixth graders. This is Mr. Scrow, and welcome back to our last 3 lessons in music class for the whole school year. We're going to dedicate some time during these lessons on the 20th century and studying music made by an orchestra for week 1. Let's get started. Let's begin the study of our final historical period with an overview of major trends and composers from the era. The 20th century was clearly a period of widespread experimentation, and many composers wanted the freedom to explore new compositional approaches without restrictions or expectations. At the turn of the century, music was characteristically late Romantic in style. Composers such as Gustav Mahler were pushing the bounds of post-Romantic symphonic writing. At the same time, the Impressionist movement, spearheaded by Claude Debussy, was being developed in France. Debussy experimented with using non-traditional music scales and chords to evoke emotion. Maurice Ravel's music, also often labeled with the Impressionist term, explores music in many styles not always related to Impressionism. Ravel's most famous piece is called Bolero, in which a single repetitive snare drum theme is stated and repeated throughout the entire song. And somehow, the listener never reports getting tired of hearing the rhythm over and over again because Ravel masterfully develops and arranges the orchestration by adding different instruments, even borrowing some American jazz elements. More on that later. Ravel's Bolero is a perfect time to stop and examine the history of the orchestra more carefully. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to compare and contrast the orchestra across the Baroque, Classical, Romantic, and 20th century eras. At its most basic, an orchestra is a large musical ensemble. Traditional orchestras have sections for woodwind instruments, brass instruments, strings, and percussion. But why? How did the orchestra end up looking like this? To answer this question, we have to go back in time. Hey, nice toga. Yep, we're back in ancient Greece, about as far back as you can go in Western music. And since this is ancient Greece and we're in an auditorium, that means one of only 2 things. Either it's time for the Olympics, or we're watching a play. And it's a play. Theater was one of the most venerated traditions of the Greeks. They absolutely loved it. And what is theater without music? This is where we first see the idea of an orchestra, which in Greek meant the front part of the stage reserved for instruments and the chorus. Since the chorus sang much of the plot, music was an integral part of theater. Fast forward over 1,000 years later, the first semblance of the modern orchestra came in the early 1600s, when the Italian opera composer Claudio Monteverdi formally assigned specific instruments to perform his music. Monteverdi's original version is what we think of today as the modern-day orchestra. After that, under the influence of great composers like Beethoven, orchestra grew in size and reputation, and the brass and woodwinds took on an even more important role, and the role of the conductor was standardized. By the 1800s, the orchestra pretty much had its traditional look. We still use the standard orchestra today, although modern composers often experiment with new instruments and sounds. But the importance and general shape of the ensemble is the same. For the rest of the period, we'll be listening to one of my favorite orchestra pieces, which really isn't saying much because I love orchestral music. However, trust me on this, Ravel's Bolero is worth our study today because he masterfully showcases the early 20th century orchestra. Bolero was originally composed as a ballet, and it's Ravel's most famous composition. Ravel introduces a single snare drum rhythm that repeats over and over again. T, triplet T, triplet T, 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 triplet T, triplet, triplet, triplet T, triplet T, triplet T, 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 triplet T, triplet, 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 and so on and so on. It repeats through the entire song. The genius part of this work is the melody, and how Ravel hands off the melody to various instruments throughout the piece. Can you count the number of times that the melody repeats in Bolero?
Not surprising, this Academy of Music audience is giving a very warm round of applause for the Philadelphia Orchestra and Maestro Riccardo Muti for the brilliant ending to this gala tribute concert, Ravel's Bolero.
I'm sure our television audience...